Gareth Hughes, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Kia ora ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Kia ora. I rise, Mr Speaker, to oppose this bill. Mr Speaker, it was around 7 years ago today we saw masked gunmen on behalf of the New Zealand government terrorise a community in New Zealand under the rubric of protecting New Zealanders. But all they did was terrorise a community, scaremonger amongst the New Zealand population. And what we see 7 years on is a continuation of that government approach, this time using online technologies and internet communication technologies. Mr Speaker, I'm proud to be opposing this bill. It's a small contribution I'll be making. I'm opposing it because I'm wanting to stand up for freedom. I want to stand up for Kiwis' privacy. I want to stand up for less state in people's lives and state interference. Mr Speaker, I remember when the last government was in there and we saw low-flow showerheads and efficient light bulbs saving Kiwis money was nanny state. Here we have a government under the GCSB and the TICSA bill literally going down the country's internet cables through their fibre connections into their homes to intercept them. What we're seeing them interceptions on behalf of other governments as part of our relationships with other Five Eyes networks governments, Mr Speaker. So I'm proud to be voting against this bill. It's bad law, it's badly drafted, seen through a bad process, and it's bad for Kiwis and it's bad for our thriving ICT sector. First up, it's bad law. This bill, coupled with the GCSB legislation, rewards the unlawful activities of our spies. What we saw was, after those Urewera raids, 85 Kiwis unlawfully spied upon, but instead of inquiring into what went wrong, trying to fix those mistakes, what this government's decided to do is legislate, make right what was unlawful. What we're seeing is the government expand their surveillance reach. We now see service providers included under that massive big government, under national. What we see in this law is the interception capabilities being enhanced. And then we see on the network security side of this bill's legislation, Mr Speaker, we see now ICT companies need to be consulted, consult with the GCSB, get their sign-off for installing new kit, and they must be intercept ready. It's badly drafted. I'd like to quote from NZ Rise, the open source software community of New Zealand. They write, "The bill is currently drafted so broadly it creates huge uncertainty and therefore business and investment risks for anyone in the New Zealand ICT industry or wanting to enter it." We're seeing some improvements from the Minister, like the so-called Clause 39, which would rule out things like Facebook Messenger, things like Google Hangouts, Mr Speaker, which many Kiwis use because they use encryption technology. So it was incredibly poorly drafted. We're seeing this through a poor process. We're missing the crucial step, which is an inquiry. We need to find out what this government got so wrong when we saw unlawful spying on Kiwis, so we can make it right. After all those cases of unlawful spying, after the Snowden revelations, we need an inquiry, we need a better process. And it's bad for our ICT sector. What we're seeing is greater uncertainty, greater government involvement, and what people invest and install, we're going to see greater delays. Mr Speaker, we're even seeing our ICT companies say they're going to have to choose between either breaking New Zealand law or US law. And in fact, what we might see is those Kiwis choose not to operate in New Zealand. We will be the poorer for it. We're seeing, with the rise of cloud-based computing, real risks to the next frontier where New Zealand could see true thriving growth. We saw just 2 days ago, Rogeri Zero raise $180 million in capital for his cloud-based accounting software. Using these new cloud-based tools, we can offer the world services. But what this government's decided to say is, you need to do it with the government GCSB signing it off. It's going to stifle innovation. It's going to squash our potential of the ICT sector, and that's why we're voting against it. Bad law, badly drafted, bad for our ICT industry, bad process. That's why we're voting against it. Kia ora.
The Honourable Marianne Street.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker.